I was standing in the checkout line at Trader Joe's when the message popped up. Mom, we changed the locks, don't come home. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, the noise of the store fading into silence. My pulse didn't spike, my throat didn't close. I just stood there, jaw tight, breath even. I read the words again. Cold, final, not a question, not a conversation, a sentence. My fingers moved without thinking. Didn't plan to. I hit send, tucked my phone in my coat pocket, and finished paying for my almond milk and frozen dumplings like nothing happened. But something had. Not just the text, the line. The confirmation of what I already knew. This wasn't a family. Not really. It was a performance. One I'd been clapping for far too long. I drove home to my small apartment downtown, a place I'd built with the scraps of my own effort, no handouts, no safety nets. I dropped the grocery bags on the counter and finally let myself feel the weight of it. Not grief, not rage, just certainty. They'd finally said it out loud. They didn't want me. And this time, I didn't want them back. This wasn't the first time they'd pulled something like this. The first time I'd been punished for not bending. But it was the first time they'd made it official, permanent. The door wasn't just closed, it was sealed. And the sick part? I was relieved. I should have seen it coming. The tension had been rising for months. My brother, the golden boy, had racked up another pile of debt, and Mom thought I'd just swoop in like always. I didn't. Dad, silent as ever, played mediator until it got uncomfortable. Then he disappeared into the background like he always did. I'd finally said no, and that was enough to be exiled. But they didn't understand something. They hadn't shut me out. They'd set me free. It started 2 weeks ago. Mom called, her voice too cheerful, too smooth. That fake sweetness she always used when she wanted something. Honey, she said, dragging the word out like it hurt her mouth. Your brother needs a little help, just for a few months. I already knew what a little help meant. Thousands. His 5th fresh start. I told her no, not because I couldn't afford it, I could, but because I was tired of being the backup plan, tired of pretending I didn't remember the time she left me at home with bruises to explain. The nights she made me the problem, while my brother screamed and broke doors and got forgiven in the morning. So this time, I said it, calm, clear. No, Mom, I'm not doing this again. She laughed. Not the funny kind. The kind that says, you think you're better than us now? Then she got cold. After everything we've done for you? I almost choked. Everything they'd done? Like forgetting my birthday 5 years in a row? Like using my college savings to bail out my brother when he wrecked his 3rd car? Dad called the next day. Not to mediate. Not to check on me. Just to say I was tearing the family apart. I told him I wasn't the one using guilt as currency. He hung up. Then came the group chat blow-up. My sister-in-law jumped in, calling me selfish. My aunt added some passive-aggressive scripture about honoring your parents. I muted the chat, deleted the messages, and breathed for the first time in weeks. I'd finally said no. Not with venom. Just with truth. And they hated me for it. A week later, they told me to skip Sunday dinner, said it would only cause tension. I didn't argue. I baked lasagna for myself, lit a candle, and watched a movie alone. It was peaceful. The next morning, the lockout text came. But they hadn't locked me out. They'd pushed me toward the life I'd already started building one without them. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd lost a home. I felt like I'd finally walked out of one that never let me in. My brother Ryan was born 3 years after me, and from the start, it was like the world bent to his smile. Mom called him her miracle baby. Dad said he was the son he'd always wanted. I was just there. The helper. The shadow. When Ryan broke things, it was a phase. When I spoke up, it was attitude. He got trophies for participation. I got scolded for not clapping loud enough. Even as a kid, I saw the imbalance, how they looked at him with pride and at me with expectation. I worked hard, not to compete, but to belong. Straight A's, perfect attendance, scholarship offers, all of it met with a polite nod and a distracted, "That's nice, honey." Meanwhile, Ryan flunked classes, wrecked bikes, skipped curfew, and still got ice cream the next day. Mom said, "He's sensitive," as if that explained everything. When I turned 16, I saved for 6 months to buy a second-hand car, a faded blue Civic that coughed when it started. Ryan got a brand new Mustang on his birthday, a gift to motivate him. I remember standing in the driveway, keys in my hand, watching him rev the engine while Mom filmed and Dad cheered. No one noticed I'd just finished a double shift at the diner to pay for my own car insurance. They called it fairness. I called it blindness. College only made it clearer. I left home with 2 suitcases and a $500 scholarship check. Ryan stayed, taking community classes until he dropped out. When his debts piled up, Mom called it a rough patch. When I asked for help with rent once, just once, she said, "You made your choices." The double standard was so familiar it almost felt normal. Almost. I stopped asking for anything after that. They treated Ryan's failures like accidents and my achievements like obligations. Over time, the resentment stopped burning hot. It turned cold, quiet, settled deep. I didn't hate him. I hated what he represented, a life built on excuses and applause. He coasted while I climbed, and yet somehow, he was still the favorite. Every time he messed up, I paid for it in guilt and expectation. Every time I succeeded, I was reminded not to make him feel bad. I used to think if I just kept proving my worth, they'd see me. But no amount of success shines bright enough to blind people who choose not to look. Some memories fade over time, but the ones that shape you never do. Mine start in a kitchen that always smelled like burnt toast and disappointment, Mom's sharp voice cutting through the air. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I'd be standing there holding a report card full of A's, wondering what else I could possibly give. Dad would sit at the table, silent, eyes glued to the newspaper like it was a shield. He never defended me, never contradicted her. Just sipped his coffee while I learned how to swallow words that wanted to scream. I used to count how many times she said Ryan's name in a day, 10, 20, sometimes more. Mine usually followed after a sigh. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I was cold. There was no right way to exist, only wrong ones. By 12, I'd figured out invisibility. It kept me safe. I did my homework, cleaned my room, cooked dinner when Mom worked late, and pretended not to notice when they forgot to say thank you. I learned early that love in our house wasn't unconditional, it was transactional, so I became useful, reliable, predictable. I got my first job at 15, bagging groceries after school, then moved on to waiting tables on weekends. Every paycheck went to textbooks, savings, independence. When Ryan asked for money, Mom called it helping family. When I said I couldn't afford to chip in for his messes, she called me selfish. The hypocrisy stung, but it taught me something valuable: self-reliance. I stopped expecting fairness. I started planning exits. By 17, I'd saved enough to apply to out-of-state colleges, and I remember the look on Mom's face when I told her. Not pride, not sadness, just annoyance. "Who's going to help me with Ryan?" she asked. That was the moment I realized she didn't see me as a daughter, she saw me as a backup plan. I left anyway. And yet, even years later, a part of me still wanted her approval. That's the cruelest part of growing up invisible. You learn to live without love, but you never stop hoping it might find you anyway. The crack didn't happen overnight, it built slowly, like pressure behind glass. Then one day, the glass finally shattered. It started when Mom called about Ryan again. Her tone had that soft edge she used when she was about to twist the knife. "Honey, your brother's in a bit of trouble," she began, like she was reading from a well-rehearsed script. I could already fill in the blanks: debt, bad decisions, someone else's fault. This time, though, the stakes were higher. "He just needs a co-signer for a small business loan," she said, her voice sugar-coated and sharp underneath. "He's finally trying to get his life together." I could practically hear Ryan in the background, rehearsing his redemption story. I took a deep breath. "No, Mom, I'm not doing that." Silence. Then the explosion. "How could you say that? You know how hard he's worked," she snapped. "He just needs a chance." But what she really meant was, he needs you to pay for it when it falls apart. I stayed calm. If he's serious about responsibility, he can build it on his own. Like I did. She scoffed. Like my success was an insult. "You think you're better than us now? You've forgotten where you came from." That line always came out when they ran out of leverage. By where I came from, she meant them: the guilt, the manipulation, the endless rescues. I refused to step back into that role. "I haven't forgotten," I said quietly. I just stopped apologizing for leaving it. She hung up without another word. 2 days later, Dad called. He didn't ask, he ordered. Sign the loan or don't bother coming to dinner Sunday. His voice wasn't angry, just cold, practiced. The kind of tone that told me Mom was standing right beside him, feeding him lines. I almost laughed. An ultimatum, as if family was something you could revoke like a gym membership. I told him I wasn't coming. That's when the group text went silent. No more calls, no messages. Then the final blow. Mom, we changed the locks, don't come home. I read it once, twice, then typed my reply. Didn't plan to, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. The first night after the text, I didn't cry. I thought I might, that's what people expect when they're cut off from family, but instead, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea, staring at the quiet walls of my apartment, and felt peace. A strange, heavy, beautiful silence. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for a call, a favor, or an apology that would never come. I was just alone, and it felt like safety. I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, holidays, forced smiles. Every picture looked the same. Me on the edge, Ryan at the center, Mom glowing with pride, Dad pretending not to notice. I'd spent years trying to crop myself into their version of family, but I never really fit. That text, as cruel as it was, didn't exile me. It confirmed what had always been true. I wasn't welcome, not because I failed them, but because I stopped serving them. That realization settled over me like warmth instead of weight. I thought about the phrase, "Don't come home." But what was home, really? The place where love was a reward for obedience? Where silence meant peace and boundaries meant betrayal? No, that wasn't home. It was a cage dressed up as family. They didn't just change the locks on a door, they locked themselves inside their own small world of control, and I'd finally stepped out of it. The irony hit me. I used to dream about moving away, starting over, finding freedom. Turns out, freedom found me through rejection. The eviction text wasn't punishment, it was release. That night, I opened my windows and let the cool air rush in, carrying the city's hum and the faint smell of rain. I poured a second cup of tea just for me. No noise, no guilt, no pretending. I wasn't locked out, I was free. For the first time, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding my whole life. Leaving wasn't losing. It was winning quietly, finally, on my own terms. The morning after the text, I packed a single bag essentials only. Not because I was running, but because I knew I wasn't going back. Not this time. I stayed with my friend Carly for a few nights. Her guest room smelled like lavender and fresh paint. She didn't ask for details, just handed me a blanket and said, "You don't owe anyone an explanation, not even them." Her kindness cracked something in me. I hadn't realized how long I'd gone without soft places to land. I found a new apartment within a week, small but bright, with hardwood floors and a balcony just big enough for a chair and a coffee mug. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one else's name on the lease, no backdoor obligations. Just me and the quiet. At work, something shifted. I'd always been good, reliable, meticulous, but now I was sharper, lighter, my manager noticed. I got promoted to project lead on a contract we'd been chasing for months. The bonus check came with a handwritten note. "You carried this, proud of you." I stared at the words longer than I should have. It was the kind of affirmation I'd begged for growing up. Now it was coming from people who didn't owe me anything. That was the difference. I started saying yes to things I used to decline out of guilt or exhaustion. Drinks after work, brunch on Sundays. A friend of a friend introduced me to someone, Jonas, a web designer with quiet eyes and a crooked smile. He didn't ask about my family. He just listened when I finally told him. "Sounds like you've done a lot of surviving," he said, "but now you're living." I didn't correct him. He was right. My life stopped being reactive. It became intentional. I bought plants, joined a book club, learned to cook something other than boxed pasta. Every small choice felt like a rebellion against the version of me that only existed for other people. The locks may have changed, but so had I. I wasn't someone they could summon anymore. I had rebuilt from ashes, not bitterness. And with every step forward, I proved to myself that exile wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The first crack in Ryan's perfect image didn't come from him, it came through Aunt Margie. She called out of the blue, her voice low and cautious, like she was leaking state secrets. "I thought you should know. Your brother's in trouble." I leaned against my kitchen counter, heart steady. "What kind of trouble?" Credit cards maxed out, the business loan defaulted, he missed 2 rent payments, your mom said he might have to move back home. I stayed silent, letting her words hang. Part of me wanted to feel something: anger, pity, maybe even satisfaction. But mostly, I felt distance. He was no longer my problem. Aunt Margie sighed, waiting for me to swoop in. I didn't. A few days later, a message came from Dad. No apology, no small talk. Just, "Ryan's going through a tough time. Maybe you could reach out." I stared at the text, the gall of it. The same man who'd told me not to come home was now inviting me back, not to belong but to clean up the mess. Again, I didn't respond. Then came Mom's email. Long, dramatic, full of guilt-laced paragraphs and emotional landmines. He's your brother. He needs support. Family doesn't turn its back. She had the nerve to include a Bible verse. I deleted it. The manipulation used to work. It used to make me question myself, wonder if I was being cold or heartless. But now, I saw it for what it was: desperation wrapped in sentimentality. They weren't asking out of love. They were asking out of habit. Because I'd always said yes. Because I was the fallback plan. But not anymore. That door was locked now on my side. I'd changed the locks, too. A week later, Carly and I were walking through the park when she asked if I'd heard from them. I nodded. They want me to fix Ryan's mess. She raised an eyebrow. And I'm not going back. I said it with a calm I'd never had before. I wasn't angry. I was done. Ryan's fall wasn't my failure. Their struggle wasn't my responsibility. I didn't owe them another ounce of my peace. Let them face the silence they created. I was too busy living the life they told me I didn't deserve. It started with a call from my bank. Just confirming, are you moving forward with the personal loan consolidation? The rep's voice was polite, robotic. I froze. What loan? I hadn't applied for one. I hadn't even logged into my bank's loan portal in months. The silence on the other end stretched. We received an application under your name last week, he said. Social, birthday, all correct. It was flagged for manual review. I hung up, heart racing. Within an hour, I pulled every credit report I could. There it was, a $15,000 loan in my name. Issued 2 years ago. I dug deeper. The email listed on the application was nearly identical to mine, but off by 1 letter. The address? My parents'. My childhood home. The repayment trail led nowhere: missed payments, then nothing. It had slipped into default, quiet and unnoticed, dragging my credit with it. I didn't want to believe it. I called the loan company and requested the original documents. It took a week to get them. When the envelope arrived, I tore it open at the kitchen counter. The signature was shaky, but it mimicked mine. The handwriting on the form, it wasn't a stranger's. It was Mom's. Neat, practiced. I would have known it anywhere. I sat down hard. The betrayal tasted different this time. Colder, calculated. It wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. It was identity theft, financial fraud, a deliberate violation. They'd used me not as a daughter but as collateral. My name had become currency. I called Carly first, then Jonas, then Mark, an attorney a coworker had recommended after a messy divorce. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection. Power. Mark didn't flinch. We'll file an affidavit of fraud with the creditor and notify the FTC, but if you want to press charges... He let the sentence trail off. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the papers on my kitchen table. The forged signature. The proof. This wasn't just about money. It was about a family who saw me as a resource until I became a threat. The mask had slipped. I knew now they'd never loved me without condition. They only loved what I could give. But they were done taking, and I was done giving. I didn't show up at their door. I didn't scream or cry or demand answers. I sent a letter, formal, cold, with a return address that wasn't mine. Mark helped me draft it. 1 page. Plain language. Legal tone. Cease and desist. Identity theft. Loan fraud. If you do not respond, we will proceed with litigation. It hit like a grenade. The call came the next morning. Mom, her voice cracking like a bad connection. You're seriously doing this? We're family. I didn't answer her question. I asked one of my own. Why did you use my name? She stammered. spun a story about hard times, Ryan's bills, Dad's health. "We meant to pay it back," she whispered. "We didn't think you'd ever find out." That part stuck with me. We didn't think you'd ever find out. Because they knew it was wrong, they just didn't think I'd matter enough to notice. Dad called next, all bluster and silence. "Let's not escalate this. We can fix it privately." I told him we were already past private. The loan was in collections. My credit was damaged. My trust destroyed. He didn't apologize. Just exhaled like I was the problem, like I was ruining something by refusing to stay silent. I filed the fraud report that afternoon. The loan was frozen. A criminal case was optional, Mark said. I told him to hold. I wanted time to think, to breathe, to decide what kind of justice I needed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted space, accountability, the freedom to live without looking over my shoulder. Carly and Jonas sat with me that night, papers stacked on the table, wine untouched. "You're doing the right thing," Carly said, "even if it hurts." It did hurt. Not like a burn. More like frostbite, slow, creeping, numbing everything until I couldn't remember what warmth used to feel like. But beneath the pain was clarity. This was the line. Not drawn in sand, but carved in stone. Legal. Financial. Emotional. They'd stolen enough. My time, my trust, my name. Now I was taking it back. Not as their daughter. Not as their scapegoat. As myself undeniably. Unapologetically. And they would feel the absence where my silence used to live. The fallout came faster than I expected. It started with vague Facebook posts, Mom writing things like, "So heartbreaking when your own turns against you," and "You raised them right, and they still abandon you." No names, but everyone knew who she meant. Mutual relatives started reaching out. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, "Hey, just wanted to check in. Your mom said you're going through something?" Going through something. That's what they called it. Not they committed fraud, not they lied for years. Just me spiraling, lashing out, hurting the family. They were crafting a new narrative, one where I was the villain, the ungrateful child, the cold-hearted daughter who turned legal when love was all they asked for. I didn't take the bait. Let them talk. Let them spin their version to whoever still listened. Because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't owe the world my side. The truth was in the documents, the defaulted loan, the forged signature. The truth was in the silence that followed when I refused to play along. Some people believed them. That's inevitable. People love a good martyr story, especially when it lets them ignore their own complicity. But others reached out quietly, softly. An aunt who'd always been a little too quiet at family dinners, a former teacher who remembered the bruises beneath my sleeve when I said I fell off my bike. "I believe you," they said. I didn't need their belief. But it mattered anyway. The peace that came wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It looked like sleeping through the night. Like checking my bank account without flinching. Like smiling without wondering who would weaponize it. I deleted my family's numbers. Blocked the group chat. Updated my will. I was done reacting. I had nothing left to prove. They could shout their story into the void if they wanted. I wasn't listening anymore. Because the truth didn't live in their words. It lived in my silence. In the life I was finally living, one they never got to take credit for. They changed the locks to shut me out. But I'd already closed the door behind me. 6 months later, I stood barefoot in the kitchen of my new place, coffee in one hand, sunlight pooling across the tile. My plants were thriving. The air smelled like vanilla and clean linens. Jonas was still asleep in the other room, curled around a pillow. I watched the city wake up through the window and thought, this is mine. Not the apartment. The peace. The freedom. The life. I didn't get here because they loved me. I got here because they didn't. Because I stopped waiting to be chosen by people who only valued me when I was silent, useful, convenient. This home wasn't built on guilt. It wasn't paid for with pieces of myself. It was built with boundaries. With learning that love doesn't mean sacrificing your sanity. It took me years to understand that the family you're born into isn't always your home. Sometimes, it's the place you have to leave to survive. I think back to that text. We changed the locks, don't come home. And I smile. Because I was already gone. They didn't lock me out. They freed me. I didn't just walk away, I stepped into something better. Carly still visits on Sundays, bringing pastries and gossip. Jonas and I started hosting small dinners, nothing fancy, just laughter, stories, a safe place to be ourselves. No one asks me to shrink. No one keeps a scoreboard. This is what family looks like now. Kind, chosen, rooted in respect, not obligation. And when I tell people my story, when I say I cut them off, they always ask, do you miss them? Sometimes I miss the idea of them, the version I created when I was small and needed someone to stay, but I don't miss reality. I don't miss the weight. And that's what I want you to know. You don't have to earn the love of people who only offer it with conditions. You don't have to bleed to belong. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to build something better. They changed the locks, but I opened a new door, and on the other side of it was everything I was told I'd never deserve, and more. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.